few minutes to come on, to say hi. Um, connecting. You can never tell when it's actually connected.
I know.
Did you get a look at the actual birthday book?
I have not, but
No.
um, I'll save it. There you go. You're live now.
Yes, here we are. So, hello, everybody, and welcome to the American Freak Show Substack Live. This lovely Tuesday afternoon, I'm coming to you from New York City, and my guest, Reed Galen, is coming to us from Park City, Utah. I've known Reed for a couple of years now. I think we've been communicating since at least the beginning of the, well, during the Biden years, I think we were talking. Reed is a pro-democracy activist, a commentator. He was an original co-founder of the Lincoln Project, which I think many of you are familiar with. Uh, he's now president of jointheunion.us, which he can tell us a little bit more about, an organization dedicated to rebuilding America's foundations. He's worked in national politics for 25 years, a quarter of a century, and not as long as I have. He has his work has been included in most major newspapers. We'll talk about some of your candidates, your former candidates, in a minute. He's a regular guest on MSNBC. He writes the Home Front column on Substack, which I recommend everybody take a look at. Um, and he hosts a podcast of the same name. So, welcome to the Freak Show. And let's just start by a little background. Reed and I were chatting, I guess it was over the weekend, about the situation, where we're at. And I really, really respect his experience in actual politics. I mean, I've been a commentator for years, but I'm not an expert in the down and dirty, how you get people to vote, how you get people to come out and vote, and counting the numbers, what's going on the Hill, and so on. And he has been spending a lot of time in Florida, working on basically doing the Lord's work down there, Gatorland. And we were talking, we thought, the Epstein story, which I've tried to keep on top of at the Freak Show. If you've been reading it, you know that we are every week trying to poke a little bit more at the bear and also just dig up a little bit more stuff. And now really looking for things that the Oversight Committee can start to, can add to their list of materials that they ought to be pulling up. So we talked about that a little bit, but the reason I really want to talk to you today is we're looking at we're now what? How many months into the nothing to see here era on
Eight, eight and a
eight?
half, eight,
Nothing,
eight-ish.
nothing to see. No, I mean the nothing to see here
Oh yeah,
in the Epstein thing. When
yeah,
Pam
right.
Bondi says, there's nothing to see here, and then suddenly the key to the liberal elite Satan worshiping pedophile ring conspiracy is just a hoax after how many years of MAGAs and QAnons being fed on this idea that it is the key to the bringing down the liberal elite pedophiles. And when it first broke, when Pam Bondi first said there's nothing to see here, you did see some of the MAGA influencers, a lot of them actually, including people like Charlie Kirk, saying, we can't accept this. This, we have to know what happened. Let's see the paper, let's see the documents. And that looked like the beginning of a crack in the MAGA wall. And then the Wall Street Journal released the picture, which is in the birthday book that we now have the entire version of online. Everybody can see it. And immediately the response from the MAGA world was, well, it's obviously the liberal media, even though it was the Wall Street Journal, it's the liberal media, and this is an absolute hoax and a fraud and a fake and a forgery. And at that point, a lot of them jumped on and they went to bat against the media and, typical, blame the media. And they went after the Wall Street Journal. He's suing Rupert Murdoch for the sum of $10 billion. And so here we are. And that was how it was until I think we now see that the actual birthday book exists and there's other material that the oversight committee has managed to acquire. So Reed, where do you think we are at with the possibility that the Epstein material that we should keep talking about would actually have an effect on this this coalition of conspiracy theorists and Trump lovers in the Congress, really?
Sure. Well, first, Nina, thanks for having me, and thanks to everybody that's joined us. So, I want to go back to something that you said in the middle of your open, which was the thing that's most important about Epstein is the foundational nature of it to QAnon and MAGA. The idea here was, yes, everybody had, and remember that we have to shed rationality. That's the first thing we have to do. We have to say, let's
Out the
take the
window.
rational, bye. Is they knew that Trump was friendly or even friends with a Jeffrey Epstein. But in their mythology, he had cast Epstein out, right? He knew what an evil person he was. And it was really the Democrats and Hillary Clinton and Comet Ping Pong and all this other stuff. And I think the reason why this has had legs, or this iteration of Epstein has had legs, that it didn't before, even if all the people you talked about, Kirk and all of them have since backed off, is it was the differentiator between Trump and the rest of the politicians. He was different because he was going to expose the deep state. And now it turns out he's just like the rest of them. Now, what does that mean for the Republican / MAGA coalition? That's a good question. So on Sunday, I was down in Fort Lauderdale with a guy named Rich Logis, who founded a group called Leaving MAGA, and we were talking about this. And I wonder if when we think about how many people are peeling off because of this, Nina, how many of them will quiet quit MAGA? That we're not going to know that they've quit because it's such a cultural piece of people's lives. It's the politics is almost secondary from the cultural and the social pieces of this. And so, like, have they just decided they're done with Trump? That's fine. That means they don't join the Facebook groups as much. But there's a lot of these things that we're just not going to know. And then let's go to Congress. So there was a video yesterday of Thomas Massey,
Mhm.
a very MAGA member of Congress from the state of Kentucky, who has been a thorn in Republican leadership and Trump's side, saying, all of my colleagues want to come out and say something, but they're afraid of the Trump machine.
Mhm.
Because he says this out loud, because nobody in my conference wants to be on the side of protecting a pedophile. Nobody wants that, but they're so afraid of Trump that they're not willing to say anything. But here you have, again, where the lines of American politics circa 2025 are blurring. You have Thomas Massey, MAGA Republican, Ro Khanna,
Yeah.
very progressive California Democrat, co-authoring or co-sponsoring this discharge petition, which has now got 200 and some signatures. You've got Mike Johnson out there literally making things up out of whole cloth about Trump being, an FBI informant, which I guess makes him akin to like Whitey Bulger, right? Pay no attention to how many people I killed. I was in it with the FBI. Pay no attention to how many young women I abused. I was
Mhm.
like, it was all BS anyway. And so this is going to be, I think, I like to say that MAGA buys in bulk, but it sells one at a time. And I think this is going to be one of those things. I think there are a lot of people who are probably within this coalition, within this movement, who are, they're only in it for Trump anyway, right? That's the only reason they came to it. They're not really Republicans. The Republican Party has followed along because it was the easiest path to power. But I think it's going to take a little longer to see what happens. And my concern, frankly, is that the closer that this gets to becoming a reality, two things are going to happen. One is Trump's going to go crazy, but how could you tell? But then the other part that we haven't talked about, Janine, is that there are a lot of senior Democrats who want this to go away too, because I think they're also scared of whose
Mm-hmm.
names might be on that list.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, if you're a Democrat in power or running for office, if a Democrat's name shows up on that list, you have to throw them to the wolves too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's play a little realpolitik here. Like, no one should be defending pedophiles. No one, no one, no one. Right? It is a horrific crime. So many of these victims have now shown so much incredible bravery to come out and tell their stories again after so many years. And so, what I think we're seeing is that we have an opportunity here to keep this, and I think this is why it's important. Is even as ugly as it is, one, I think we always have to remind ourselves that there are real victims, that there are real humans, real young women, children at the time who were trafficked, sexually assaulted, raped. We should never let that leave the front of our minds, because we need that. We need to remind ourselves that it still happens far too often, not only in the context of something is organized like this, but every day. Then also, let's go to the straight politics of it. Republicans aren't that much more popular than Democrats anyway. We have an election coming up. We have a lot of dynamics in Congress. Keep it at the top of the list of what you're talking about, not because any of the people who supported Trump are going to flip and vote for a Democrat, but because it's more likely for them to just throw their hands up, crawl back into the swamp they came out of, and be not to remove themselves as guaranteed votes for Trump or Trumpy Republicans
It's
come
vote. It's a
2026.
vote. It's a suppression of the vote, basically.
Yeah, I'd say depression more than
Hmm.
suppression.
Yeah, sorry, yeah,
Republicans
depression. It
suppress
will
votes.
depress the vote. Yes, yes, they do the suppression. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Yes, that it will make people stay home because they don't believe in him anymore.
Right.
And can you just explain briefly what the discharge petition is?
Yeah. So
What does that
basically,
mean?
yeah. So it's been a long time since I was a page in Congress a million years ago. But basically, a discharge petition is a it's a bill, whatever you want to call it, that a number of members of Congress can put forth that basically goes around all of the formal processes of legislation in the U.S. House, which are very Byzantine and have a lot of rules. In fact, there's something called the Rules Committee, and the Speaker basically controls that process. Speaker
Mm-hmm.
Mike Johnson and the people he appoints to the Rules Committee, so that only pieces of legislation that they want to deal with are able to actually make it to a committee or ultimately the floor. The discharge petition gets rid of all of that and says, no, we as the House, in and of ourselves, have decided we don't want to listen to the rules you've set up, and we're going to go out and do this. And I think, as I said, I think that they had, I don't know if all of the Democrats had signed. I think most of them had, and enough Republicans, I think, had, because obviously it's such a narrow margin to
Yeah,
get
it
it up
only
over
takes a few.
50%.
And you saw
Right,
MTG yesterday plastering the wall outside her office in the building down there
right,
with the Trump drawing. And Nancy Mace, I think, rock ribbed, kind of kooky North Carolinian, sobbing on her way out of the room with those women
right.
last week, and now apparently is on the side of this discharge petition. I think I'm not 100% sure, but
Yeah, and
she.
this is
So
like
there's a
where.
little crack in the. But just to be clear, though, what the discharge petition means is that this topic will become discussable on the House floor.
Mhm.
But does it also mean that like other committees will take it up? Because it's already, the oversight committee is already, I mean, that's a whole other part of what the process here. That's how we got this material, which I don't think everybody has even gone through yet. From, when they dropped the birthday book yesterday, they got the whole thing. And they got other materials that I haven't been able to go through. I think it may have to do with finances and so on. So the oversight committee is already acting, or at least has demanded, has subpoenaed from the Justice Department material that we haven't seen before. And that's new. I've covered this, the Ghislaine Maxwell thing from way early on in 2019, worked on a documentary about her. And I know the case pretty well, and it was quite clear that, earlier this year when they dropped the binders on the right-wing influencers, that was going to be nothing. It was a nothing. They're giving them stuff that's already
Hmm.
out there. And, in my opinion, a lot of the material, a lot of the names actually are out there. People keep talking about the client list, the client list, the client list. And it's, to me, there were already 1,000 names in the Ghislaine Maxwell Black Book that they put together. And I think, we know some of those names already. So it's just what to me is so fascinating about this whole phenomenon is that it's sort of a mass social psychology thing. I don't know what you would call it. That this was the fact that Trump was hanging out with this guy and was his buddy has been widely known and talked about. I mean, Michael Wolff released a bunch of information right before the election last year. Where he was talking about, he had 500 hours of interviews with Epstein, and Epstein was on record talking to him about Trump's friendship and the real reason that they are not pals anymore had nothing to do with any of the behavior. It had to do with a real estate deal in which Trump then ended up getting the better hand and getting the mansion in Palm Beach that he then quickly flipped to the Russian oligarch who paid, I don't know, 5 times what he paid for it. A clear kind of money laundering situation. And that's what they broke up over, not the treatment of the women. Um, I want to talk to you a little bit about how the MAGA coalition looks if this keeps going into election 2026, into the midterms. And is it possible that there would be that, when this Epstein thing started, I had a political friend in Europe call me and say, well, this is just going to be like Watergate. And I thought, I don't think so. You have to have Republicans in Congress on these committees agreeing to go after him. And do you think there's any chance that any of these people will break loose and have the moral and maybe physical courage? I don't know. They're afraid to stand up to this and really dig into it.
Well, I think again, Massey, Green, a few of the others. Remember that they're sort of the true believers in
Right.
MAGA,
And
right? They
you only need how many? Like, how many of them need to break away? I guess if you
um,
had all the Democrats, you would only need like three or
like
four
three or
Republicans.
four, maybe five. But to your point about the committees, and again, I'm rusty on my mechanics here, but I mean the committee chairs and the speaker and the majority leader still control the committees. So even if you get a discharge petition, it doesn't necessarily mean that a committee is going to do something. Also, as you noted, you can subpoena. The oversight committee can subpoena information from the Justice Department. The Justice Department doesn't necessarily have to send it over with any dispatch, if at all. And I think we need to remember that these are not independent actors. They're all part of the same cabal. So James Comer, who's I still believe is chair of the oversight committee,
Yeah,
right? Like he's not looking to ding Donald Trump before 2026. He wants to keep his job. He doesn't want to get primaried. He wants an expanded Republican coalition in the U.S. House, and so um, nobody's acting independently here. Again, with the exception of a few of these people. So I don't think we should see any of that. I think, again, let me put my campaign hat on for a second. I think it's important now, again, to be communicating directly to MAGA voters across the country in a way that says he's just like everybody else. He's just like everybody else. At long last, the thing that you counted on him for was wrong. He lied to you about the one thing he said he'd never lie about. Remember, they don't care that he's lied about everything else. They don't care that he's a jerk. He's their jerk. But this was mythological. This was something in
exactly.
their mind that was going to crack open the deep state, show the underbelly of ugliness that is Washington D.C. and the powerful, and now I think you're seeing a little bit of that cognitive dissonance that we hear so much about. It's not easy to break people out of this stuff. They've spent now a decade convincing themselves that this stuff is true. And now you have the Wall Street Journal. Remember, I mean, it wasn't but a couple of years ago that Rupert had to pay nearly $800 million to Smartmatic or whichever one it was. So, like, he wasn't going to publish any of this stuff unless it was dead to rights. And his attorney said, "Yeah, you're free and clear on this." And as you know, as a journalist, truth is the ultimate defense. And if this thing is legitimate, which I assume it is, we shouldn't believe anything. He's going to post that stuff. Trump is a means to an end for a guy like Rupert Murdoch. He drives ratings, he drives readers, he drives clicks, but he never liked the guy. He thinks he's a
Right.
baboon, which he is. And so I think that what we're seeing now is that the way you should do this again is talk to the Republican voters and say he's just like the rest of them, but then put Republican candidates into what I like to call the box canyon. Make them make a choice between defending Trump and a pedophile or wanting justice for young female victims, right? Make them make that choice. They're going to want to go with Trump because he's at least theoretically, the safer play. But there are enough conservative women who will see ugliness in this too. That again, they can't afford to lose the votes. If you look back at the 16, 20, and 24 presidentials, Nina, as I think we talked about on the phone, it wasn't who got more votes that won. It was the undervote that killed the loser. So Hillary didn't get the votes she was supposed to in 16. Trump didn't in 20. Harris didn't in 24. Again, this is really because we have so many people opting out altogether. It is a really ugly race to the bottom. And so if you can convince, again, in some of these places, it could be hundreds or just a few thousand Republican voters not to show up, you could swing a few districts, which again, remember, this is all mixed up together. The reason why we're seeing the insanity in Texas and everything else is because they know back in 2018, Trump's first midterm, Democrats netted 40 seats. They're trying to cut into that number. And so we should be thinking, okay, if they're trying to cut into that number through the mechanics, how are we going to do it through politics? And Epstein, is ugly and as odious and is gross as it is on so many levels, Democrats don't like to fight this way. And I like to say, you play the game you're in, not the one you want.
You've been in this game for so long, and you know the
I'm only 40.
Republicans.
I'm only 28 years old. Look at me.
I know, and you're so, yes, and you look much younger. But we know that you've been around Republican voters. You worked with Republicans. You were a Republican strategist. Let's make that clear until you
Yeah.
broke away. Um, and I just wonder if you can kind of game out, what is it that would actually make people walk away from this. I mean, I talked to a conservative, I call him my MAGA pen pal
Mm-hmm.
out west, who's a decent guy, doesn't like Trump, but is down with the whole program because he's getting, they're getting what they want. They're getting their energy, deregulation, and they're getting, he thinks the tariffs are a great idea for some reason. And so, they're actually paying attention to the policy and they're getting what they want. And he's like, it's like he's our ogre. It's
Mm-hmm.
cool. We can live with this guy because we're getting what we want. I mean, there is that cult mentality, but there is also this group of people. And if you scraped away a lot of the cult stuff, there are people out there who really aren't cultishly into him. But when does this kind of, this story that's just been bubbling along for so long, when does it actually penetrate enough people that they really do start breaking away? And I also think that if they do break the back, and or if Trump isn't there anymore, they are not going to be able to coalesce around Vance, no matter what.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a couple of things there. One is I don't know that there's any that the Epstein piece again. It's more like the Chinese water torture. It's drip, drip, drip. We
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't think about it as a dam breaking. That'll be enough of my aquatic metaphors. So I think that we should think about it that way. Secondly, on to your last point about what comes after. History teaches us that when an ideologue or a unique individual, and that's as best as I can call him, like Trump, leaves the stage, usually because they've shuffled off that mortal coil.
Yeah.
People don't tend to like publicly renounce that they were Donald Trump supporters. It's more of there's a small percentage that sort of do the Rip Van Winkle, like, wow, what was I thinking? But there are a lot of people for whom that period in history or in their lives is just over. right? And so yeah, you do reshuffle the deck. Is it a JD Vance? Is it does Marco Rubio bring is Marco Rubio running enough to bring the quote unquote never Trumpers back to the Republican Party because they were never really comfortable with Democrats? You got Ron DeSantis, who, as you noted, I was in Florida, right? Who is now, Trump, DeSantis 2028, make measles great again. That's an opening gambit for him running for president. But none of these people have a lock on what the MAGA thing is. And if Trump leaves office, the number one most valuable asset in a 2028 Republican primary will be his endorsement. So if
Mm-hmm.
he's still alive, they're not going far. I don't think that Don Jr. or Ivanka, maybe they have a little bit of a little bit of juice, but nothing like him. He is
No.
the alpha and the omega of the movement, and
Mm-hmm.
so I think that it's too soon to say. We're only 7+ months into his next term. Again, I make an assumption he's going to make it to the end of this term. Whether or not he leaves is a whole other discussion we could have another time. But if and when he finally does disappear, I think that's a whole other discussion that's far too
Yeah.
fuzzy for anybody to say yet.
We're coming up on our 25-minute here. I just want to say, I really want to have you back on to talk about the 2026 midterms, because a lot of people, civilians who are not in this business with us, that I know, are in an utter panic about that, the idea that there will not be an opportunity, even if we did have, get around this whole gerrymandering game that they're playing, and we do manage to match them, that they're going to have so much ice on the streets and so much military in these cities that they're going to manage to, um, you know, stop the election, or maybe not stop it openly, but put up a wall against any kind of resistance electorally. So I want you
Sure.
to come back. I really appreciate you coming on, and thank you everybody for listening. And
Thanks,
yeah,
Nina.
you'll have to dip back into the Epstein files. I recommend that everybody just at least take a look at the birthday book, because it is appalling, but also fascinating that many men, high level men, were egging on this, basically a sociopath, if not a psychopath, and enjoying watching him. In addition to participating, really enjoying watching him misbehave. It's mind boggling.
Thank you, Nina.
Bye.
Bye.